This is Love Never Fails with your host, Marilyn Redmond. Marilyn shares her experience, strength, and hope, and includes tools to help you find your inner strength for health, healing, and empowerment. So now, please welcome the host of Love Never Fails, Marilyn Redmond.
I'm your host, Marilyn Redmond. You're listening to Love Never Fails, and we are on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. And we want to welcome you back to the show, Love Never Fails. We're having great times every Tuesday afternoon, and we're glad to share the message and have you join us. Tell your friends and neighbors and everyone you know that this is a really good program because you're hearing new things. Maybe you didn't hear them this way before. Maybe it's opening new doors for you that you hadn't thought about. So, our lives can always improve, and we can always change into a better way to handle it. So if you have questions or concerns, you're welcome to call us at any time while we're on the show, 866-451-1451. And today we're going to just carry on from what we did last week. And last week we moved into grace, and we released the past and the future. We got rid of the fears and the resentments and the angers. And anger is a major problem with many, many people. And this actually keeps us out of reality. It's actually keeping your mind on other things than love, or in your heart, or kind and loving actions that you can take or think about. So, but when we get into grace and we've removed that, the resistance to love, we've gotten out of our heads, moved into our hearts. Now, how do you stay in balance? And that's what today's show's about. If you think of the justice scales and how they're both the same level, that's balance. Or you might think of a seesaw, and both sides of the seesaw are going straight across along with the earth plane. So not one end isn't up higher than the other. You want it to be straight across that parallels the ground underneath. And how do you do that? Because, what happens is that our brain has wonderful little ways of coming in and saying, I'm going to screw this up. I don't want you to leave listening to my ego and my messages. I don't want you to trust your heart and the love inside. So let's give you a little resistance. We're going to check you out, test you, see if you really are going to choose the right answers, choose the loving responses. So staying in balance is a real trick. So we can get into grace, but staying there is another thing. And so often these obstacles that come into our life, the challenges and the tests we have to make sure, are we going to always choose the love for the answer? Sometimes we can really inflate them out of proportion and make them really big. I know how to inflate all kinds of problems in my life because what I focus on grows. And we want to change that. So when you realize that most of the time we're pole vaulting over mouse turds. So when you reduce the problem down to its real size, it's not such a big problem. I can move forward and do a better way of handling it today. But I'm learning how to handle things and responding to them rather than reacting. So staying in balance is really important. And if you've heard of Thomas Merton, he was a famous priest, has written books. And he has this quote, happiness is not a matter of intensity, but a balance, order, rhythm, and harmony. So if you want to stay in balance, like we're talking today, it's not how heavy-handed do we have to be in our life. In fact, sometimes being light-handed brings it up to a better place. So it's staying in balance, order, rhythm, and harmony. That's what's going to bring us happiness because we move out of our ego. And we're moving into what is called reality. So we want to keep our sanity, stay in a loving place for all people around us and even ourselves. And so last week we talked about getting rid of good and bad, right and wrong, and criticism and judgments. And just today we're going to move up into that higher grace and look at ways that we can stay there. In this higher consciousness, we have guidelines or slogans that we can use to accomplish this. And that's what we're going to offer today. It's like we've moved into a new country and we have new rules or a new guidebook. So some of the things we're going to talk about today are those new rules and things to remember. Because I have a short memory sometimes about when I'm learning something new. I put things around the house like Post-it notes and write on the Post-it notes. So it reminds me when I walk into my bedroom, there's quite a few in there. And right next to my computer here today, it has the Post-it note, keep it simple. These are little slogans that help me stay in reality, help me stay in balance. And so you might want to have a pencil out today and check out what the different ideas are. You can jot down and put on a note and put in your house to remind you as you're walking through the particular room or wherever you want to place them on a bulletin board maybe, that these little ideas come into your mind and say, oh, yeah, I've got to stay on the flow. That's another one, but that's not one I mentioned on my list today. The first one, though, that really was helpful, for me anyway, is easy does it. And when I heard of easy does it, that just shocked me because being an overachiever workaholic, growing up in a family where the work and chores were never done and you had to do more, and I couldn't go play with the kids on whatever my chores were done because they were never done. And I always had more to do. So there was never any easy does it, not in my marriage either, because I ended up with two full-time jobs. And the family to raise besides and all the errands and responsibilities of that. So it was not an easy life. It was always busy, busy, busy. And as I was laying on the grass one day growing up in childhood in grade school, and I was looking up at the clouds, and I was really enjoying the sunny afternoon. It was a summer day, and I was laying next to a apricot tree. For some reason, I really like apricots, and that tree seemed to just feel real good when I was around it. So I'm laying next to the tree and looking up in the sky, and my mom called out the window, and she said, Marilyn, don't you have anything to do? And she says, well, get in here, and I always have something for you to do, so get in here, and I'll show you what needs to be done. And being the obedient little girl in those days, I went in, and I've never stopped working. In fact, I've been such an overachiever, I tend to go into burnout, and that's kind of what's happened lately. Easy does it for me is not easy, because if I'm not productive, then I don't feel worthy. If I'm not busy, I feel like something's wrong, what's missing. So for me to learn easy does it has been a real challenge. To slow down, lighten up, and only take on what I can handle. I'm still not sure how much I can handle. I don't know. Some of you might have a procrastination problem, but that's never been an issue for me. So that's not a word I didn't even know when I was going in my earlier years. So, I've always basically been running on empty, I guess you'd call it, and moving quickly to the next item because it had to be done or there was consequences. And so therefore, becoming a workaholic and overachiever has really taken its toll on my life. And if you know that you don't have to do it all in one day, you don't have to do it all right now. And the world isn't going to fall apart just because you didn't take care of something today. I've had to learn that lesson. But it's been a hard lesson. And I ended up in my psychiatrist's office in this state of exhaustion. And he gave me a good piece of advice. He said that I needed, instead of to take a coffee break, I needed to take a meditation break. Now, that was new to me. How do you stop and meditate or take? I didn't even drink coffee in those days, so a coffee break was unusual. So then he said to take a meditation break. Man, that was really out in left field for me. So learning easy does it, restores my equilibrium, and I don't have to take on the whole world at once and do everything so it does get done. Marilyn has to do it all. Well, I've given up on that one, and I learned to give myself breaks. This is Marilyn Redmond, and we're coming to you from Love Never Fails today on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio, and stay tuned for more slogans to help you take it easy. I'm your host, Marilyn Redmond. This is Love Never Fails, and we're coming live to you from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio, talking about slogans and sayings that help us stay in balance, and so we don't have to go back into our old ways, we can stay on top of our lives in a happy, useful, productive way where it works smoothly for us. And we're talking about Easy Does It right now, the first slogan that I thought you might be interested in today. If you have some other ideas you want to add to what I'm saying today, give us a call at 866-451-1451 and tell us how it works for you. But, I always blamed myself for a lot of problems in my life, and I blamed others also. And I distorted a lot of things that my mind helps me to do that besides inflate them. And I put a lot of demands on myself, but I was taught by my parents and husband to put demands on me. And so when I got rid of their demands, I had to give up on myself too and give up demands on myself. And I've learned to pace myself better today. I do take it easier. It's much nicer to have a little break. There was a television show years back called Give Me a Break. Oh, I thought that was a blasphemy. I was never allowed to take a break. But people, I'm going to give you permission today. If you need to take a break, sit down, take a cup of tea. Peppermint tea will raise your spirits. And so sit down in the nice sunshine or out by the window where the sun's shining and give yourself a nice little tea break or coffee break or get yourself a cookie or whatever and take a little break. And you don't have to be in this push, push, push mode that I'm trying to still get out of. We have another slogan that could help you called Live and Let Live. And that was also real new to me. I had trivialized a lot of things, and I was very self-sacrificing. And did not know what serenity was, and I was always enabling and trying. I didn't control situations aggressively. I was too passive and shy for that. So I found out you can do it without being obvious, and I was a very passive controller. Trying to arrange the show is really not my job. And I'm not supposed to be here to control other people, places, and things. Oh, well, if they just acted right and did the right things that I wanted them to do, life would go just well. That's what I thought. I needed to let them know what was going on. Well, people, I was a control freak, and I just didn't look like it on the surface. I just seemed to learn from my mother very well how to just kind of set things up, but you don't have to be obvious about it. So that doesn't work very well, I found out. It comes back and bites you. So in that case, I was still holding on to my pain and resentments and the things that we got rid of last week. And then God can't manifest in my life if I'm trying to control it, because guess who's in charge? A higher power. In the manifesting of the universe is really how the things come together. And if I'm trying to control, the events can't fall into place like they're supposed to. I didn't know you didn't plan the events that come out at the end, the results. So I had to give up planning the results and just do the footwork and let things fall in place like they're supposed to. And it's not my will be done, it's thy will be done. My will is a childish, I want my way. And I had to give up being that controller or fixer or willing victim. And, this is other people, I wanted them to take care of me because I was such a good little victim. And I was hopeless, but I found out is if I take care of myself, it works so much better. I had to focus on my own ability and enjoy my day and not interfere with someone else's life. So, tolerance was really an important word that I had to learn and realize they're doing the best they can with who they are, and it's not my job to change them. So live and let live taught me to detach, and that's an important word, people. Learning love never fails is our show, but learning to detach will make your life so much better. Let them have their life the way they need it. It's not my job to tell them how to do it. And then I can live in more fully because I'm having the focus on myself. I'm doing what's right for Marilyn. I'm taking care of Marilyn, and that's Marilyn's job. It's not my husband's. It's not my parents'. It's not anybody else's. That's called growing up and becoming mature. I take care of myself, and I'm responsible. And it's also called codependency. And I have to meet my own needs and love myself and validate myself. And the rest is up to God or the universe to come in and handle the consequences. And that's usually better than what I figured out or tried to figure out. So my will didn't really work very well. And what happens that shows up usually is better than I could conspire. So trying to be a control freak backfired again. Didn't work in my life. So people live and let live really does help make your life in balance. And I know today that the universe takes better care of me than other people did. And I was wishing for something that couldn't happen, but when I let go, it could happen. And that's the trick. So from that, I had to learn one day at a time, and that's the next slogan. I was always living off the past, and the past was very gruesome and disturbing from all the abuse I went through, and it kept me anchored without being where I needed to be. I wasn't in the present. I was stuck back there. And of course, what we talked about last week is the way we get out of being in the past and stuck. So to release that, I can now move my focus into right now. What's ahead of me? What am I supposed to be taking care of in front of my nose? What's the next indicated thing? So my focus is no longer on that past. It's not on the future, because the future comes from today. Are you being the best person you can be today? Are you making yourself a little better person today than you can grow into a better tomorrow? I still have those inventory sheets from last week available, people. If you tuned in last week, we had 2 sheets that I offered and we'll send you on email. One sheet was for checking out your characteristics you need to change in yourself. And the other sheet was for an inventory at the end of the day of how you might improve for tomorrow. And I'll tell you how to get those sheets when we come back from our break. I'm Marilyn Redmond. This is Love Never Fails, and we're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. I'm your host, Marilyn Redmond. This is Love Never Fails, and we're on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. And just a minute ago, I was talking about some sheets that would help you keep track of staying in the present, staying in the one day at a time, staying out of the past, and being in balance. So if you want to have your copies of those 2 sheets that will help keep you on track for staying in balance, you can write me at marilyn@angelicasgifts.com. MARILYN at Angelica's Gifts, one word, ANGELICASGIFTS.com. No charge. I'll just be so glad to send them out. It really helped me to at night with the little monthly calendar to check off what I did that I wanted to do better the next day. It kind of brought it to my mind and kept me in the forefront of focusing on what am I really trying to do better tomorrow, so I have a better tomorrow. So one day at a time, I can change those things. You know, it just happens easily and gradually when you're focused on what you're trying to accomplish. And this is the right use of will. And, you know, the other sheet is about the characteristics that I'm trying to change and improve so that I'm actually sending out the love that I want to send out rather than my old energy where I was feeling so victimized and fearful and scared. So we don't have to stay in those old places. And when we move into grace, staying there is the trick. So one day at a time, I don't have to be in fear. I don't have to be in what ifs or have that anxiety. A lot of people write in questions to me about anxiety and depression, and a lot of it's because they're not living one day at a time. They're still letting the past run over their lives. So if we're staying in the moment, moment to moment, I can now have a better future because I'm living a better life today. It keeps me in the now. And you know what? I can even stop and smell the roses. So like when we have Easy Does It, you know, take a time out to have a coffee break or a meditation break. You can even stop and smell the roses. That's an old saying that people used to say. And that's reality. So we're moving out of our old heads and we're firing the old voices and we're moving into a new place. So when we get there, we want the next slogan is first things first. instead of trying to do it all at once and worry about the outcome. Oh, this was big for me. My list was usually around 12 things, I suppose, in a day, trying to get it all done besides my job, come home and take care of all the things at home. No one ever taught me that if I do one thing at a time, first things first, prioritize, I'd actually get more done. And before I had these deadlines, and I'd get very frustrated. So it was important to learn how to put things into order, good orderly directions, G-O-D, good orderly directions. And so if the flowers need watered right now, I take care of that right now. And therefore, they actually are surviving nowadays. I used to just not water the flowers, and the poor things didn't survive. So if my editor needs the next chapter, I sit down and work on that. It works much better than putting it off, of course. So I have to do the next right thing, and if I prioritize, it works out quite simply like, oh, really, the rest of the things kind of fall in place and take care of themselves. So I've really learned that when I have my list and prioritize first things first, guess what? That's what I did today. In fact, I'm getting ready to go on a trip. And what was the first thing I had to do today? And what was the next thing? And, by the time the show came along, I had all those things taken care of, and they just all worked out. It's wonderful how that helps me to be a more organized and person in balance. So the thing that I need to also remember is another slogan called Keep It Simple. And that's important because I tend to complicate things. It's very easy. I was talking with somebody, I was ordering a tub cover the other day, and somehow this man doesn't know how to keep it simple. I was able to get on the internet and get the answers for some of the things he was quandering about. And within 5 minutes, I had the answers, and he's still looking for some of the answers. So it's so easy that when you keep it simple, it goes quicker, faster, and it's more efficient. I don't have to stay in the crisis and the chaos and the old turmoil. And that's when I take responsibility for what I need to do. And I don't imagine it worse than it is or harder than it is. In fact, I took the word hard out of my vocabulary. Somebody says, oh, this is really hard to do. Well, I have to do it, and I can make it hard, but I can also make it easy. So I discovered something. My intention can complicate things. I have a friend who always seems to think everything's going to come out wrong, terrible, not the way it's supposed to, so it'll work out. He's always looking in the future thinking this isn't going to go well, this is going to be a problem. And my intention is to just say today's going to be a good day and it'll all fall into place and I'll be happy when we get things taken care of and moved on. So my intention helps to keep it simple. What you're telling yourself is very important. Your body has consciousness, and that's one of the things medicine is still coming in to understand. What you tell yourself, the body will do. So if you say, oh, I'm going to be a really sick person, and I know several people who have purposely made themselves sick to become handicapped so they didn't have to work. And, so what you tell yourself is really important. And then, of course, guess where they are, living on doctors' doorsteps and paying the bills. My intention, I've had a lot of medical problems, as you've heard over the different radio shows. My intention is to become healthy and whole and happy and move past my medical problems. I don't intend to stay medically sick, or, I've moved into sanity. The doctors declared me sane out of my mental illness situations. I've moved into sanity, which is wonderful today. Haven't had any pills for over 17 years. We don't have to keep ourselves sick. Just keep it simple. Tell yourself, I am a healthy person. Affirmations help you do this. And my book, Paradigm Busters Reveal the Real You, is full of affirmations, and especially health affirmations. So keep it simple, keep yourself healthy, and tell yourself the truth. And you don't have to control anything. You just let it come together. The biggest lesson I had was in putting together that Paradigm Busters book. I had a really good editor that sat me down and put it into order so it could keep it simple. Let's look at this part. Let's start with chapter 1. Let's go on to chapter 2. And then with inside of chapter 1, we worked on it sentence by sentence and then moved on to chapter 2, sentence by sentence. And I want to tell you a joke that goes with that when we come back from our break. So I'm Marilyn Redmond. Love never fails, and we're on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. I am Marilyn Redmond, your host, and you're listening to Love Never Fails. We're coming to you live on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. And if you have any comments about keeping in balance, or stories, or jokes, or any advice for us, give us a call, 866-451-1451. And I do have a joke for you. We were just talking about keeping it simple, and I had to learn how to do that. That book, Paradigm Busters, took me 25 years to write. Now, that's a complicated project, right? So my editor was wonderful with helping me put together a plan and just doing it as we did it, one chapter at a time. Over the years, I actually had to take a break because it was such an overwhelming project, and then I was back on track. What I discovered is somebody told me this joke about how do you eat an elephant. Maybe you've heard it before, but it's a great joke. It helps me. And they say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. That's what I did with the book, one bite at a time. And that's what I do with my life at home today, one bite at a time. Somebody asked me at one point, how do you get all the work done that you accomplish? And it's one bite at a time. I sat down just before the show and started on my column for next month for one of my newspapers. And I got it started. When I get off the air, I'll work on it some more. But I couldn't do everything at once, but it was time to sit down. And that was what my bite was about. Just that article that needed to get started. So I'm not trying to do 10 things at once, one bite at a time. It works really well. Well, if you got your pencil out and you're writing down these comments and slogans and helpful hints, the next one is think. And I didn't know how to think for myself is the biggest problem I discovered. Growing up, my mother thought for me. That's how I became a teacher. That's how I became a musician. That's how I took dancing because she wanted me to be a dancer. This were the days of Shirley Temple. I was to be another Shirley Temple, of course. And she was living through me in those days. And so she did all the thinking for me. And my husband did the thinking for me. He was a teacher. And when he changed from teaching to having a printing business, I was informed, I would be the bookkeeper. He couldn't afford one. I was going to be doing this or that needed to be done up there on my vacations from teaching. And I never thought what I could do during my summer vacation. He had it all planned out for me, was working up with him. And so even schools teach children how to think. And that's one of the reasons I'm having a really hard time with education today. I taught school till I retired. And I helped kids learn how to think for themselves, how to think out of the box. And my methods of teaching are no longer what they do in schools today. Kids are taught to think what's in the box and not to question and not to look for other answers, but just do what they're told and then they pass. And of course, that's what tests are about. If you don't think like they want you to think, you failed. Well, nobody's a failure. It's just that you have different talents than somebody else. So, if you think for yourself and you're not in the box, it works actually better. When I got divorced, I had to start thinking for myself. This became a real challenge for me to learn to make decisions and be responsible. It was a little scary. I hadn't taken emotional responsibility for my life because everybody did it for me. And so today, and I talked earlier about meditation, but that's where I get my direction today, and how to think about what's the right next thing for me is the directions I get in meditation. I have an interesting story about how I learned to think better for myself. I was on a vacation and visiting some relatives, and they knew I was coming, but they'd already planned a party, said I could come to the party, of course. And so they were outside in this lovely Colorado evening and having their drinks, and I was trying to be sociable and visit. And the fellas went off one place to go talk, and the ladies went off to the kitchen to go talk. And so I was left with one lady to visit with, and I started to visit. Well, she got up and left and went to the kitchen too, and didn't say goodbye or do you want to join me or anything. She just left me sitting there. So I thought, well, I'll just join everybody in the kitchen. So I did. And then they went to another room that was so small we couldn't all get into it. Guess who couldn't get into it? Me. They all filled the room up. It was a tiny room. And they're having their conversation, and I'm being left out again. So it just so happened there was a little apartment in the basement that I was staying. So I thought, gee, I'll go downstairs and get that new book I bought. And they've got a really neat recliner chair. And I just crawled into that chair and cozied up into that and turned on the light and started reading away in my new book and having a great time. While I was enjoying my book, I heard the front door shut as everybody left. And I was sitting there having a happy time. So even though I was rejected, I thought what I could do differently and have a good evening, even though I wasn't really included. I could think myself into a new situation, and I didn't have to get myself all stirred up because of the rejection that I was experiencing. So thinking for yourself is important to people. Sometimes what we're thinking is we can change it ourselves. And I had to understand in another situation when Christmas, my friend was writing out big checks for his family for Christmas gifts. And I'm watching him write all these checks out, knowing I'm not going to get one. And I that night started to get fuming because I wasn't going to be the recipient of all that money. And, you know, I got so angry that I got up out of bed, sat in the chair in the living room, fuming myself and couldn't sleep. So I decided I was going to go in the bathroom, and I looked in the mirror and I said, Marilyn, what's really going on? You know, and I says, well, nobody ever gave me money. My sister, half-sister, always got money when she wanted it, but nobody ever gave me money. You know, that's just never, I've always earned my own money, and that's where it's come from, is what I've learned. And I was a little jealous, obviously. And so what I discovered in myself was the amount of money they were getting might have looked like a large figure, but I had spent the year with him. We had gone all kinds of trips. We had gone places. I also had contributed to some of the financial expenses, but what he had spent was more than what he was giving them if I added up everything we had done throughout the year. And I realized that what wasn't the money was the problem. I really was there and had companionship, and I enjoyed being with him. The time spent, the memories we had, all of that was more important than the amount of money. So I could think myself into a different place. I didn't have to stay in my old fuming situation. I actually felt like I had been the winner of the whole situation because the only time he saw them was on Christmas for their checks. I got to see him all year long, and that companionship was more valuable than the money. So stay tuned for more stories about and slogans. And I'm Marilyn Redmond. This is Love Never Fails, and we're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. I am Marilyn Redmond, your host for Love Never Fails. We're coming to you from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. And the phone number is 866-451-1451. We've had people call in, so don't be shy. You might have something you want to add, a comment or a question. We're talking about staying in balance, and we've been talking about ways that the different slogans can help us do that. It's really important, like the last one was think. And, you know, changing my thinking has been so important because it used to think very negatively and reactively. And today I can think more positively and respond from that being positive. So life today has moved into a new place, and it's much more pleasant. And I discovered that with my positive attitude, I achieve serenity. Serenity is really important today. I like to have that. That means I am in balance. And another slogan you might want to write down is, this too shall pass. And oh, did I think that was a big joke. What happened in my life I thought was in concrete. It was never going to change. I really did think I was going to have a life terrible, horrible, and awful, and that was my lot, and I was just going to have to endure it. And I had no clue 40, 50 years ago how to do that. But change is actually very productive and satisfying. But for me, it wasn't safe to change. I was supposed to play this part in my family and stay that way. And it was too threatening for them if I changed. So when I discovered this too shall pass, it was threatening to them. But I had to learn that I could leave their dysfunctional ways, and it wasn't because I didn't love them. It wasn't because it was a bad situation, but I didn't want to stay that dysfunctional, so I had to leave to improve my life. And it wasn't because they were bad people. It was because I wanted to grow out of where they were and grow beyond it. So things had to change in my life. Things had to move into new ways of learning that I didn't have before, and that can bring on anxiety. It's changing your comfort zone. And when you're in the middle of changing your comfort zone, anxiety does come in. And that's going to be realistic. And so when I would realize, oh, I'm going through a new situation again that I haven't handled before, this is new to me, and that's where the anxiety comes from. As soon as I recognized it, the anxiety would leave. And I'd be calm again. So when I know what I'm feeling today, that makes the difference. And I don't have to stay there, and it can leave. So that brought up great big relief, and I didn't have to stay in that terrible, horrible, awful place anymore. In fact, when I was making new actions in my life to move into better places, one morning I woke up and the sun was out and the birds were tweeting, and it was a beautiful spring morning, and it seemed so pleasant. I lived a mile from where I taught, so I wasn't very far from school. But I always drove because, like in the snow or something or the rain, I would drive to school. Well, this morning I thought, gee, it's really lovely out there. I'm going to walk in this beautiful sunny morning. So I walked up to school and I thought to myself, something has changed. I woke up feeling good. I woke up wanting to have a little hike in the morning. And I could see that things were changing in my life. So you do not have to stay in the tragedy and the back dysfunctional situations. In fact, every time it changes, in my case, I moved into more maturity, I discovered. As I release the old fears and my old ways, the feelings of the old leave, and I get new feelings. I discovered the feelings are my feedback, and not to act off my feelings, but to take the action, and the good feelings will follow. That's really important to know, people, that you create your own feelings. When I heard that, I thought that was the craziest thing I ever heard in my life. But what I discovered is as I changed my actions to respond in love, I felt good. I felt better. I felt happy. Like that morning I woke up and said, oh, things are actually changing in my life. I feel good. So changing comfort zones is a challenge, but, when you realize I'm in the growing process, progress, not perfection, I'm growing up out of the dysfunction. I had a situation when I was first growing with my boyfriend, and we'd been to a movie that night called The Beautiful Mind, which was about a mathematician who had paranoid schizophrenia, like my mother. And in the movie, they actually played out some of that mindset. And it put me right back into some of the old things that I had lived with. And I lost my sanity, so to speak, that night. And I got up in the middle of the night. I put my clothes on. I'm getting out of Dodge. It is not comfortable for a dysfunctional person to be around a sane person. And I was totally uncomfortable. I'd moved back into my old space of thinking. I dashed out of there in the middle of the night, came home. The next morning, I called my friend. I said, what happened? What's going on? And she laughed and she said, Marilyn, get yourself dressed, get yourself back up there. You're going to learn how to be around a healthy person. And it actually took me 3 or 4 months to get out of the anxiety of the change of being a comfortable person around another healthy person. I didn't know how to be comfortable in a different energy. And to learn how to do that, to relax, know he was safe, it knew I was going to be not hurt or harmed just because the energy's different, that it would be comfortable. I knew I was going to be okay. And I just had to let that anxiety work itself out. And, today being around dysfunctional people is uncomfortable for me. I'd rather be around the healthy ones. But, this too shall pass. No matter what the situation is, we move into new places. And how good it felt to have grace come in when I was meditating in Death Valley. So when we move into doing healthy, good actions like meditation, you feel good. It does pass out of the old energy, the old feelings, the old attitudes move and change. There's no longer the ghost or the nightmare or the threatening situation. You don't have to have the medical problems, the relationship problems, financial situations. They can change. I'm here to tell you they can. So, this too shall pass is one of the truest statements there is. And if you're going through a difficult time, do you know how you might change that around to work for you? Think of it as the old problems are falling out so the new problems or the new situations can come in. When you're having a situation like a meltdown, it's leaving because what's next is going to be better. So what's passing, you're actually passing out of what you don't want into what you do want. So this too shall pass is actually a very positive slogan. I'm Marilyn Redmond. You are on Love Never Fails, and we're listening to the BBM Global Network Tune In Radio. And when we come back, we're going to talk about Let It Begin With Me. I'm sure you've heard that one. I am your host, Marilyn Redmond. You are listening to Love Never Fails, and we're on the BBM Global Network and Tune In Radio, talking about slogans or sayings that you can use Post-its around your house, put these comments or these little words of advice on, and as you walk around, it helps remind to keep your mind on what you really want it to be on, instead of maybe where it drifted to and you're getting yourself all upset, and you don't need to do that. So we're talking about this too shall pass, and the next one is Let It Begin With Me. I'm sure that you have probably heard that in a song. It really was quite famous at one point, and there's lots of versions of it on YouTube. But it is a very valuable, honest piece of information telling me I have to be the one to change. I'm the one that's sending out what's going to happen on Earth. When I come into peace, then the Earth will come into peace. It's like the pebble being thrown out into the water, and you have the pebbles, the ripples go on beyond, and it goes further than you would realize that just throwing that pebble into the water, but the energy keeps traveling on. And when you change whatever it is in your life, you're changing everything with not just you, you're changing the universal energy, people. So when you listen to these words of the song, Let It Begin With Me, you're actually changing your reality. And when we talked last week about coming into grace, we can stay there in balance. And the more I follow the different slogans we've talked about today are just guidelines to help us do that. But I have to actually take the action to change. The problem was I looked to people who were spiritually and emotionally bankrupt for my guidance in the past. My parents were there. They couldn't give me a sense of well-being. So I had to learn what did give me a sense of well-being, and so I had to move out of my head into my heart where the love is. I had no role model, and so my mother taught me to focus on all my flaws and defects, and I felt really empty inside. So I found people that did have that love inside, and they could help me and find answers to move into being a more loving person, and to be more responsible, and for me to realize that the people around me were mirrors and what I project from my consciousness. So I now today have kind, loving, really caring people around me today instead of the dysfunctional crisis and chaos type of life I used to have. So when I'm looking out, it's like, what's coming back to me? Is it love coming back, or is there a problem coming back? Well, if it's a problem, I have to change me and let it begin with me. I have to take the initiative. So if I'm pointing one big finger out, there's three fingers pointing back at me. I'm the problem. I'm sending that out. What can I do to change this? I prefer today to send out love because that's what comes back. I had no clue when I was younger. I was sending out all my fear and my distress and my problems. And of course, my life was miserable and unmanageable. So today, because of our last week's program and what we're talking about today, most of my time today is projecting the love out that I truly always wanted in my life. So I have chosen more positive people in my life, and my life feels more fulfilled. And if you're really thinking about doing this seriously, I advise you to learn the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And so in doing that, you're actually accepting other people as they are, changing yourself, and the wisdom is you can do that. You don't have to come from fear anymore. This is our new future. The more people put love seriously into their lives, peace on earth will occur. We become the peace and enjoy our life on earth. And we're going to be coming off the air in here just a minute, so I want to remind you, I have a website, Angelica's Gifts. My books are at Amazon.com. And you can join me anytime by joining, looking for me on Google, and you'll find all my programs, lectures, and interviews on YouTube. So give a call, write me for the whatever you need, and we're glad you were here on Love Never Fails. I'm your host, Marilyn Redmond, and we're on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
You've been listening to Love Never Fails with your host, Marilyn Redmond. Go beyond old ideas and understandings and hear Marilyn's solutions to healing and a higher consciousness. Each week, here on Marilyn Redmond's Love Never Fails.